Hey everyone. We are so close to hitting 1,000 subscribers. Please smash that subscribe button and help our unveiled family reach our goal. Thanks to everyone who has already subscribed. We love you. Now to the video. The night started feeling lucky in a dumb way, like when you find a $10 bill in the pocket of jeans you forgot you owned. It was raining, that kind of soft rain that makes street lights look smeared, and I remember thinking the city felt calmer than usual. I had just turned my phone face down on the table because I was trying to look like I wasn't the kind of guy who checked notifications every 5 seconds. I was nervous, but in a good way, like my stomach was awake. I had met her on a dating app that everyone used, the one that pretends it's about connection but is really just pictures and vibes. She had suggested dinner, her idea, which already felt like a win because most first meets were coffee or a walk or something that could be escaped in 10 minutes. The place was not fancy, but it tried to be. Fake plants, warm lights, menu boards written like someone wanted to look creative. It smelled like bread and oil. She was already there when I walked in, sitting in a booth near the back. She looked exactly like her photos, which honestly surprised me. No weird angles, no tricks. She smiled like she knew something funny. I slid in across from her and everything felt easy right away. Not deep, not intense, just light. We talked about dumb stuff. Traffic. Work. How weird it is when apps recommend people you went to school with. I felt like I was doing well, like I wasn't being awkward or trying too hard. I ordered something messy because I always do that on dates and regret it later. She ordered something neat. I noticed little things. How she tapped the table when she thought. How she barely touched her phone. How she looked around the room like she was checking exits without realizing it. I didn't think much of it at the time. People have habits. I was too busy enjoying the fact that this didn't feel like a chore. It felt normal. I remember thinking that normal was underrated. Halfway through the food, when the plates were still warm and the noise of the place had settled into that steady background hum, she said it. Not dramatically. Not with a pause. She just mentioned that she was married, like she was mentioning a favorite movie or an old injury. It didn't land right away. My brain kind of skipped. I thought maybe she meant divorced or separated or in the middle of paperwork. People say married in weird ways sometimes. I was trying to line up a response in my head that didn't sound stupid when the air shifted. Before I could say anything, before my face could even settle into a reaction, someone else sat down at the end of the booth. I didn't hear him approach. He was just there suddenly, filling space. Older than us. Not old, but definitely not my age. His clothes were neat in a way that looked practiced. His face was calm in that blank way that feels worse than anger. He placed his hands on the table like he owned it. Like he had always been meant to be there. I remember noticing a third chair that I hadn't paid attention to before. I remember thinking that booths usually don't need extra chairs unless someone planned for it. My chest tightened, not in a panic way yet, more like my body was bracing without telling me why. The woman didn't look surprised. She didn't look anything. She just kept eating like this was still dinner. The man leaned forward slightly and asked me, without raising his voice, to confirm which dating app I had met her on. He explained it was for his lawyer. Not like a threat. Not like a joke. Just like a formality. Like he was double-checking an address. My brain went loud and quiet at the same time. I could hear the room again. Forks clinking. Someone laughing too hard. A server calling out an order. Everything felt very far away and very close. I realized then that this was not an accident. This wasn't a messy situation that unfolded badly. This was planned. The choice of restaurant. The booth. The timing. The way she had dropped that word married right before he appeared. It was like watching a trap close after stepping into it with both feet. I felt stupid in a very specific way. Not embarrassed. More like used as a prop. I answered him. I don't even remember how. I know I didn't argue. I know I didn't ask questions. I just confirmed the app because it felt like the fastest way to move things forward, whatever forward meant in that moment. He nodded like that was all he needed. He took out his phone and typed something, slow and careful. I noticed his hands were steady. That scared me more than if they had been shaking. She finally looked at me then. Not apologetic. Not mean. Just curious. Like she was watching how I would react to a trick she had already read in a book. I felt heat in my face. My food tasted wrong suddenly. Oily and heavy. I wanted to stand up, but my legs felt glued to the floor. The man stayed seated. He didn't tell me to leave. He didn't threaten me. He just stayed like he was waiting for the end of a song. He mentioned paperwork. Timelines. Dates. Nothing emotional. Just facts. I realized I was being collected like evidence. My profile. My presence. My confirmation. All of it fit into something bigger that had nothing to do with me as a person. I started thinking about all the little things leading up to this. How quickly she had agreed to meet. How she had chosen the place. How she had insisted on a booth instead of a table. How she had asked early on which app I was using, even though that's usually obvious. It replayed in my head like a highlight reel, but none of it helped. It just made me feel slower, like I was always a step behind. Eventually, the man stood up. He thanked me in a way that felt practiced, like he had done this before. He left some cash on the table, enough to cover everything even though I had my card out already. The number on the receipt caught my eye, $68, written clean and centered. He walked out without looking back. She stayed seated. The silence after he left was worse. The booth felt smaller. The lights felt harsher. I wanted her to explain, to say something that made this feel less unreal, but she didn't. She just wiped her mouth with a napkin and checked her phone for the first time that night. I realized then that this was never a date to her. It was a step. I was just a name that needed a face. I stood up without saying anything. My legs worked again. She didn't stop me. She didn't react. I walked past the counter, past the fake plants, out into the rain that was still falling like nothing had changed. The air outside felt colder than it should have. I stood there for a second, just breathing, letting the noise of the street reset my head. On the walk home, my phone buzzed. A notification from the app, a match. Someone new. I didn't open it. I just kept walking. I kept thinking about that third chair and how I never noticed it until it was too late. I got back to my apartment, my small live space with mismatched furniture, and sat on the edge of my bed fully dressed. I didn't eat anything else that night. I didn't sleep much either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that booth from the outside like a security camera view, with 3 people sitting exactly where they were supposed to be. I never heard from her again. I never heard from him either. Nothing happened after, at least nothing official. No emails. No calls. But sometimes when I go out to eat, I still scan booths before sitting down. I check how many chairs are around. I don't like sitting with my back to the room anymore. It's not fear exactly. It's more like my body remembers something my brain wants to forget.
I almost didn't go out that night because my hair looked weird and my phone battery was low and I had already read too many bad date stories online. But there was something about the way he typed that felt normal in a rare way. No copy-paste lines, no rush, no weird questions. Just casual messages about music he liked and a joke about how wine bars felt like libraries for adults. I remember laughing out loud at that while brushing my teeth, which already put him above most people. I told myself I would stay for one drink and then bounce, like I always did when meeting someone new. The wine bar was tucked between a closed bookstore and a nail place that never seemed open. Inside, it smelled like citrus and wood and something burnt. The lights were dim but not romantic, more like someone forgot to turn them all the way up. There were chalkboards with handwritten menus and a long counter with stools that looked uncomfortable on purpose. I got there first and picked a small table near the back, not hidden but not center stage either. My phone buzzed when he arrived, and a second later I saw him walking in, scanning the room until his eyes landed on me. He looked normal. That sounds like nothing, but it mattered. Clean shoes. Regular jeans. A jacket that looked worn in a good way. His smile didn't stretch too wide or hold too long. He didn't act like the room owed him attention. He sat down and apologized for being 2 minutes late even though I hadn't noticed. I felt my shoulders drop a little, like my body decided it could relax. We ordered drinks, something red for him and something light for me. He talked about work in a vague way, nothing specific, which I didn't mind. Lots of people keep that stuff private. He said he was working late most nights lately and needed a break from staring at screens. I nodded like I understood, even though my own job was mostly scrolling too. The conversation flowed in that easy way where you don't have to plan your next sentence. He laughed at my dumb stories. I laughed at his. It felt like we were both trying but not forcing it. The bar filled up slowly. A couple sat too close to us and argued in whispers. Someone spilled a drink near the counter and laughed it off. Music played low enough that it blended into the room instead of taking over. Time moved fast. I forgot to check my phone. That almost never happens. His phone was on the table, screen down, next to his glass. I noticed it only because it buzzed once and he ignored it. Then it buzzed again, longer this time, like a call. He flipped it over and frowned. Instead of silencing it right away, he hesitated, like he was weighing something. His fingers hovered and then tapped the screen, but he didn't pick it up fully. He put it back down, face up now. That's when the sound came through. It was on speaker. Not loud, but clear enough. A woman's voice filled the small space between us. She sounded tired and upset, not yelling, just tight. She was asking why his location showed him at a wine bar instead of where he said he would be. She mentioned working late. She mentioned being pregnant. The word hung in the air like smoke. People at the next table glanced over. My face went hot and cold at the same time. He scrambled for the phone, knocking his glass slightly so red liquid sloshed but didn't spill. He turned the volume down and ended the call fast, too fast. His hands were shaking now. Not a lot, but enough that I saw it. The table felt suddenly too small. The air felt thick, like the room had leaned in closer. He started explaining without looking at me. I don't remember every detail because my brain was already backing away. He said things about misunderstandings and timing and how it wasn't what it sounded like. He said he was under pressure. He said a lot of words that didn't land anywhere. All I could think about was the way she said his location, like she had checked it before and expected something else. All I could think about was her saying she was pregnant, like that fact alone should have anchored him somewhere far away from me. I didn't interrupt. I didn't know how. My mouth felt dry. My drink tasted sour suddenly. I looked around the bar and everything felt fake, like a set. The chalkboards. The dim lights. The way the music kept playing like nothing had happened. I felt like I had accidentally walked into the wrong scene of someone else's life. He finally looked at me then. His eyes were wide, almost pleading. Not angry, not defensive. Just scared. That scared me more. I realized he hadn't planned for this. This wasn't like the third chair situation people joke about online. This was sloppy and real and falling apart in real time. I felt like I was watching something private that I never agreed to see. I stood up slowly. My legs felt steady, which surprised me. I grabbed my jacket and my bag. He reached out like he might stop me, then pulled his hand back. He didn't say anything else. I didn't either. There was nothing to add that wouldn't make it worse. I walked to the counter and paid for my drink, $14, even though he had offered earlier. The person behind the counter didn't look at me, just slid the receipt over. I could still feel eyes on my back as I walked out, but I didn't turn around. Outside, the air was cool and sharp. Cars passed, tires hissing on wet pavement. I leaned against the brick wall of the closed bookstore and breathed for a minute. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably a message from him, but I didn't check. I already knew what it would say. Apologies. Explanations. Promises that didn't matter. On the walk home, I kept replaying the sound of her voice. Not the words exactly, but the tone. The way she sounded like she was trying to stay calm for someone else. I wondered where she was. If she was sitting on a couch with a blanket. If she was alone. I wondered how long she had been checking his location before calling. I wondered how many times he had said working late before tonight. When I got back to my live space, I kicked off my shoes and sat on the floor instead of the couch. The room felt too quiet. I scrolled through the app without really seeing anything. Faces blurred together. Bios felt fake. Everyone looked like a risk. I thought about how close I had been to thinking this was a good night. How close I had been to staying longer. My phone buzzed again. This time I checked. It was him. A long message. I didn't read it all. I stopped after the first few lines and closed the app. I didn't block him right away. I just let it sit there, unread, like a paused video. I went to bed early but didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the ring of a phone on a wooden table. I imagined being the person on the other end of that call. Checking a screen. Seeing a dot in the wrong place. Feeling your stomach drop. I hated that my night out had brushed up against something that serious and then walked away. The next morning, I deleted the app for a while. Not forever. Just enough to forget the layout. Just enough to stop expecting a buzz. Weeks later, I went back to that wine bar with a friend. We sat at the counter instead of a table. I kept my phone face down. When someone's phone rang nearby, I flinched without meaning to.
I knew it was a bad idea the moment I pulled onto her street, but not in a dramatic way. It was more like when you feel a headache starting and you tell yourself it's fine. The app said she lived a little outside downtown, in one of those neighborhoods that looks quiet but feels watched. Long driveways, low fences, porch lights that stay on even in daylight. She had asked to meet at her place instead of going out, said it would be easier, said she hated loud bars. I told myself it was kind of nice. More personal. Less awkward. The intro to all of this started earlier that day when she messaged me a photo of her dog sleeping upside down on a couch. It felt harmless. Normal. We had been talking for about a week, nothing intense, just jokes and random updates. She seemed relaxed, a little sarcastic, the kind of person who didn't overthink every message. When she suggested her place, she added that she had just moved some stuff around and didn't feel like going out. I didn't think much of it. People meet at apartments all the time. I parked a little crooked because the street was narrow and there were already too many cars. I checked the address twice, then sat there for a second with my hands on the steering wheel. Her house was small, one-story, pale siding, the kind of place that probably looked bigger in photos. The front door was open. Not wide open but cracked enough that I noticed. I remember thinking that was odd, then brushing it off. Maybe she was expecting me any second. I walked up the driveway and could hear movement inside. Not music, not TV, just the sound of things being shifted. Cardboard scraping against the floor. I knocked lightly even though the door was already open. No answer. I pushed it a little and stepped inside, calling out her name without raising my voice too much. The living room was half empty. Couch pushed to one side. Pictures missing from the walls. Boxes everywhere, some sealed, some ripped open with clothes spilling out. That's when I saw him. He was standing near the hallway holding a box, staring at me like I had walked into the wrong house on purpose. He was taller than me, built solid, wearing a hoodie with paint stains on the sleeves. His face was tight, jaw locked, eyes already narrowed like he had decided who I was before I said anything. I froze. My brain tried to catch up. I remember thinking maybe this was a roommate, maybe a brother. Maybe I had the wrong address after all. She came out of the bedroom then, phone in her hand, eyes wide in a way that wasn't surprise but panic. The second she saw both of us in the same room, everything changed. The air got heavy. She didn't explain. She didn't introduce anyone. She just stood there like a kid caught breaking something expensive. He dropped the box. It hit the floor and one side split open, random stuff spilling out. Socks. Books. A framed photo face down. He took a step toward me, not fast but deliberate. I raised my hands without thinking, palms out, trying to show I wasn't a threat. My heart was pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. He assumed I was the guy. The one she had been seeing behind his back. I could tell by the way his face shifted, like pieces snapping together into a story he had already been telling himself. He started saying things fast, accusing, listing details that didn't make sense to me. I tried to explain that I had just met her online, that I had no idea who he was, that I thought she lived alone. My words felt thin in the room like they were bouncing off walls and falling flat. She finally spoke then, but it wasn't helpful. She tried to calm him down without actually telling the truth. She said things like it wasn't what it looked like, which somehow made it worse. He laughed in a way that didn't sound like humor at all. He pulled out his phone and started dialing without taking his eyes off me. That's when I realized this wasn't just awkward. This was about to get official. I asked him to wait, to let me leave, to check the messages on my phone if he wanted proof. He didn't care. He said he was calling the cops. He said he wasn't letting me walk out like nothing happened. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like I might throw up right there on the half-packed rug. I stood there while he talked into the phone, pacing now, pointing at me like I was an object in the room. He told them there was a guy in his house. He said cheating. He said confrontation. He made it sound dangerous. I wanted to scream that I didn't even know his last name, that I had been there for less than 5 minutes. But I knew yelling would only make it worse. She started crying quietly like that would fix anything. She kept saying she didn't mean for this to happen. I thought about how many chances she had to stop it. How she could have told me she was still living with her ex, how she could have told him she was meeting someone. Instead, she let both of us walk straight into the same room like a setup. The minutes stretched. The house felt smaller with every second. I could hear a neighbor's TV through the wall. I could hear a car pass outside. Normal sounds that made everything feel unreal. He blocked the doorway to the living room, not touching me, just standing where he knew I couldn't leave without brushing past him. I kept my hands visible. I kept my voice low. I kept thinking about how this would look from the outside. When the cops finally showed up, the lights flashed through the front windows, red and blue cutting across the boxes. My chest tightened again. He went outside to meet them, talking fast, gesturing back toward the house. One of them came in and asked what was going on. I explained from the beginning. The app, the messages, the invite. I showed them my phone, scrolling back through the chat, dates and times clear as day. They listened, but their faces didn't change much. They talked to her next. She kept contradicting herself. First she said they were broken up. Then she said they were in the middle of separating. Then she said he had just come to get his stuff. Every version made her look worse. The other cop talked to him outside, then came back in with that look like he had already decided this was just messy, not criminal. They told me to leave. Not because I was in trouble, but because it was better if I wasn't there. They said it was a civil situation. They told him to calm down. They told her to figure out her living situation. It felt anticlimactic after all that tension, like the ending to a movie that cuts to black too early. I walked out with my heart still racing, my hands still shaking. The street looked exactly the same as when I arrived. Porch lights on. Quiet. I got into my car and sat there for a minute, just staring at the dashboard. I half expected him to come running out after me, but he didn't. The door closed behind me and stayed closed. On the drive home, my phone buzzed. A message from her. A long one. I didn't open it. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want apologies. I just wanted the night to be over. I deleted the chat instead, my thumb hovering for a second before confirming. When I got back to my live space, I noticed how empty it felt, but in a good way. No boxes. No strangers. No tension in the walls. I locked the door and sat on the floor with my back against it for a while, listening to my own breathing slow down. A few days later, I read an article about how often people hide whole lives online. It didn't surprise me. I thought about that hallway full of boxes and how I had walked into the middle of someone else's collapse without knowing it. I still pass that street sometimes on my way to work. I never slowed down. I never looked for the house.
I knew the night was cursed before I even met him, not because of a sign or a vibe, but because everything kept slightly going wrong in a way that felt annoying instead of dramatic. My bus was late. My shoelace snapped when I tightened it. My phone autocorrected his name to something else when I tried to text that I was on the way. None of it felt big enough to cancel over, just enough to stack up in my head like background noise. I told myself to stop being dramatic and keep walking. The place we picked was a casual sit-down restaurant near the mall, the kind of spot people choose when they want food but not pressure. Laminated menus, booths that stick to the back of your legs, a mix of families and couples who looked like they were on their third or fourth date. I got there first and slid into a booth near the middle, not too exposed but not hidden. I set my bag next to me and checked my reflection in my phone camera. I looked fine. Tired, but fine. He walked in a few minutes later and waved like he wasn't sure it was me yet. He looked normal in a very forgettable way. Plain hoodie, clean jeans, hair slightly messy like he had tried but not too hard. He smiled a lot. Maybe too much. But people smile when they're nervous, so I didn't read into it. He sat down across from me and apologized for being late even though he wasn't. That made me like him a little. The intro part of the date was easy. Small talk, jokes about the menu, the usual stuff. He talked fast but not in a creepy way, more like he was trying to fill silence before it existed. He asked questions. He listened. He laughed at things that weren't even that funny, which I decided to take as a compliment. I ordered something simple. He ordered something greasy. The smell hit the table almost right away when the food came out. About halfway through eating, I noticed he was sweating. Not dripping, just a light sheen on his forehead. I figured the food was spicy or the booth was uncomfortable. He shifted around a lot, adjusting how he sat, scooting back, then forward again. The table shook slightly every time he moved. I asked if he was okay and he nodded too fast. Said he was fine. I believed him because why wouldn't I? Then he stood up. It wasn't sudden like jumping up. It was slow and stiff, like his body was working against him. His face went pale in a way that didn't look like nerves. It looked like something had drained out of him. For a second I thought he might faint. I half stood too, ready to grab his arm, but then everything changed. There was a smell. Not immediate, but spreading. Heavy and wrong. The kind of smell that makes your brain react before your thoughts catch up. He froze, eyes wide, still standing halfway out of the booth. The restaurant noise dipped for me, like my ears were underwater. I realized what had happened a split second before my brain wanted to admit it. He tried to play it off. He laughed weakly and blamed the chair, like something had broken or spilled. He looked down at the seat, then back at me, still smiling in that stretched way. The problem was that nothing was broken. Nothing had spilled. And the smell kept getting worse. People at the nearby tables started shifting. One woman covered her kid's nose without even looking over. A server froze mid-step, tray in hand, eyes flicking toward us and then away. I was stuck. I didn't know what to do with my body. I wanted to disappear under the table. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. Instead I just sat there, staring at him, my fork paused halfway to my plate. My brain kept looping on the fact that this was real. That this was happening to me. That I would never forget this. He refused to leave. That part is what turned it from embarrassing to disturbing. Anyone could have had an accident. Bodies are weird. Things happen. But he just stood there, insisting it was fine, insisting we could keep eating, insisting the chair was the issue. He sat back down even though the booth was clearly ruined. He waved off a server who approached, her face tight and polite and strained. He said everything was okay. It was not okay. Management stepped in fast. They didn't say much, but I could see the plan forming. Nearby tables were quietly asked to move. People picked up their plates and bags, glancing over with confusion and disgust mixed together. The area around us slowly emptied out, like an invisible circle expanding. I was trapped at the center of it with him. The smell clung to everything. My clothes. My hair. My throat. I pressed my lips together and breathed through my nose, which did not help. My eyes watered and I couldn't tell if it was from the smell or from holding back tears. He kept talking like nothing was wrong, telling a story about work, laughing at his own jokes. His voice shook, but he powered through like denial could rewrite reality. A server finally told us they needed to clean the area. She asked him to stand again. He did, slowly, and that made it worse. I felt like I might throw up. She asked if he needed help. He said no, he refused again to leave, saying he just needed a minute. A minute of what? I still don't know. I slid out of the booth then. I didn't ask permission. I grabbed my bag and stood near the edge of the cleared space, not knowing where else to go. The rest of the restaurant stared like they were watching something unscripted and awful. He looked at me like he expected me to sit back down. Like this was just a weird pause we would laugh about later. Management asked me quietly if I wanted to move to another table. I shook my head. I couldn't imagine sitting anywhere in that building again. My appetite was gone forever. My trust in normal evenings was gone too, at least for the night. He finally left after what felt like an hour but was probably 10 minutes. He shuffled toward the exit, still insisting it wasn't what it looked like. The smell followed him like a shadow. When the door closed behind him, the restaurant exhaled. People whispered. Staff moved fast, spraying cleaner, opening doors. I stood there feeling like I had survived something I didn't know how to explain. I paid at the front even though I hadn't finished eating. $22 for food I would never think about without gagging. The cashier didn't make eye contact. I don't blame them. I walked outside into the cold air and breathed like I had been underwater. My phone buzzed immediately. A message from him. I didn't open it. I didn't need to know what he said. On the ride home, I kept checking my clothes, like the smell might still be there. I rolled the window down even though it was cold. Every red light felt too long. When I got back to my live space, I stripped and threw everything straight into the wash. I stood in the shower longer than usual, just letting the water hit my back, trying to reset my brain. Later that night, I sat on my bed in clean clothes and stared at the wall. I kept seeing his face when he stood up. The color draining. The way he refused to accept what had happened. It wasn't funny. It wasn't just gross. It was unsettling in a way I didn't expect. Like watching someone break from reality over something undeniable. I blocked him the next morning without reading his messages. I didn't feel bad. I didn't feel anything about him at all. I just felt tired. For weeks after, every time a chair creaked in a restaurant, my stomach flipped. Every time someone shifted too much, my brain went there. Some dates stick with you because they're good. Some stick with you because they rewrite what you think can happen on a normal night out. I didn't tell anyone I was going on that date because it felt like one of those nights that could easily turn into a nothing story, the kind you forget by morning. It started late, already a red flag for me, but I ignored it because I was bored and restless and tired of staring at my walls. He had suggested a 24-hour diner near the highway, the kind with bright lights and laminated menus and booths that never quite feel clean. I remember thinking that at least it would be public, at least it would be quick, at least there would be fries. I got there first and slid into a booth that stuck slightly when I sat down. The seat made that peeling noise like tape being pulled too slow. The place smelled like grease and coffee that had been sitting too long. A couple of truckers were eating in silence near the windows. A group of teenagers laughed too loud in the corner. The vibe was loud but empty at the same time. I checked my phone, scrolled, pretended I wasn't nervous. He came in wearing a jacket that looked too thin for the weather and jeans that had clearly been worn all day. He waved when he saw me, that half-wave people do when they're not sure yet. He smiled a lot. Again with the smiling. It wasn't creepy, just constant. Like he didn't know how to turn it off. He sat across from me and immediately commented on how sticky the table was, which was true, but also not a great opener. I laughed anyway. The intro part dragged. Not bad, just awkward. We talked about random stuff. Work hours. Traffic. How diners always feel frozen in time. He kept shifting in his seat, pulling at his jacket, crossing and uncrossing his legs. I thought he was nervous. I was wrong. The server came over and we ordered coffee for him, water and fries for me. Nothing fancy. Nothing risky. When the food came, the smell hit first. Fried and heavy. My fries were fine. His plate looked like a heart attack, but he seemed excited about it. He ate fast, barely chewing, talking between bites. I noticed his hands were shaking slightly, but I told myself to stop overanalyzing. People have quirks. People get anxious. About 10 minutes in, he went quiet. Like fully quiet. No smiling. No talking. Just staring at his plate. His face changed color in real time, draining until it looked almost gray under the harsh lights. Sweat beaded along his hairline. I asked if he was okay and he nodded without looking up. Then he stood. It was sudden enough that the booth shook. He pushed up with both hands like he was lifting something heavy. The second he was upright, his body stiffened. His eyes went wide. And then it happened. There is no graceful way to say it. He pooped himself. Right there. Standing in the middle of a crowded diner. The smell was immediate and unmistakable. Thick and awful and spreading fast. My brain rejected it for a second, like this could not be happening, like there had to be another explanation. There wasn't. He froze. Just stood there. Then he laughed. Not a normal laugh. A forced one that cracked halfway through. He looked down at the booth and then back at me, pointing at the seat like the chair had betrayed him. Like the booth had caused this. Like gravity had glitched. People noticed right away. A woman 2 booths over gagged and stood up. A trucker muttered something and pushed his plate away. The teenagers went silent. The air changed. Servers stopped moving. The smell wrapped around us and settled in my throat. My eyes burned. He sat back down. That's the part one still can't fully process. He sat back into the booth like this was a minor hiccup. Like we could just keep eating. He waved his hand in front of his face, still blaming the chair, still smiling that stretched smile. I could see stains on his jeans. I wanted to crawl out of my skin. I stood up so fast my knees hit the table. I grabbed my bag and stepped back, heart pounding, hands shaking. I didn't know where to go. The diner felt huge and tiny at the same time. Staff rushed in with towels and spray bottles. Management appeared out of nowhere. They started quietly asking people nearby to move. Tables emptied one by one. Plates abandoned. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. He refused to leave. He shook his head every time someone suggested it. He said he was fine. He said it was a chair problem. He said he just needed a minute. A minute of what? I still don't understand. He stayed seated in that booth, surrounded by empty space, like an island of denial. The smell only got worse. They cleared a wide area around us. It felt like being quarantined. Yellow tape would not have surprised me. I stood near the counter, hugging my bag to my chest, trying not to breathe too deep. People stared openly now. No one tried to hide it. This was not subtle. This was a spectacle. One server asked me quietly if I knew him. I shook my head. I said it was a first date. Her face changed instantly, sympathy flashing across it before she masked it. She told me I could leave whenever I wanted. I didn't need to be told twice. I walked toward the register to pay, even though I hadn't eaten more than a few fries. The smell followed me, clinging to my clothes, my hair. I felt like everyone could tell I had been sitting with him. Like it was written on me. I paid $18 and didn't wait for a receipt. As I headed for the door, I glanced back once. He was still there. Still sitting. Still insisting nothing was wrong. Staff hovered at a distance like they were dealing with a wild animal that might bolt. The booth cushion was already being prepped for disposal. The diner would never be the same again, at least not in my head. Outside, the cold air hit me like a reset button. I bent over with my hands on my knees and breathed until my vision stopped swimming. Cars passed on the highway, headlights streaking by. Normal life continued a few feet away from absolute chaos. I checked my phone out of habit and immediately regretted it. He had already messaged me. Multiple times. Long messages. Excuses. Explanations. Emojis that did not belong anywhere near this situation. I did not open them. I did not respond. I blocked him before my brain could second guess it. The ride home felt unreal. I rolled the windows down even though it was freezing. I kept thinking the smell was still on me. I kept checking my jacket, my hair, my hands. When I got back to my live space, I stripped in the entryway and shoved everything into the washer. I showered longer than usual, scrubbing like I could erase the memory along with the smell. Later, sitting on my bed in clean clothes, I tried to process what had just happened. It wasn't just gross. It was unsettling in a deep way. The refusal to leave. The insistence on pretending reality was something else. The way he chose denial over dignity over basic logic. That part stuck with me more than anything else. I drove past that diner once a few weeks later by accident. Just seeing the sign made my stomach flip. I will never eat there again. Probably never sit in a booth without checking it first. Probably never forget how fast a normal night can turn into something you can't unsee. I thought the worst thing that could happen on a date was awkward silence or realizing the photos were from 5 years ago. That was my baseline fear. I wasn't prepared for technology to turn against us in public, under bright lights, with witnesses. The night started with that excited dread feeling, like you're walking into something unknown but hoping it leans good instead of bad. I had already told myself not to expect much. Just a drink. Just a vibe check. Nothing serious. We met at a sports bar that tried to pretend it wasn't a sports bar. Lots of screens, dark wood, neon signs that buzzed softly. The kind of place that smelled like fried food no matter what time it was. He picked it, said he liked places with energy. I got there early and grabbed a high-top table near the wall, not too close to the bar but close enough to see the TVs. My phone buzzed constantly from group chats I ignored. I wanted to be present for once. He walked in looking exactly like his photos, which already put him ahead. Clean haircut, confident walk, smile that seemed practiced but not fake. He hugged me a little too long for a first meet, but I let it slide. People have different comfort levels. He ordered drinks without asking what I wanted, which annoyed me, but he guessed right so I didn't call it out. The first part of the date was actually good. He was funny in a low-effort way, like he didn't need to perform. He talked about his job without bragging. He said he was single and said it casually, like it was a boring fact. I remember nodding and feeling relieved. Single was the bare minimum but somehow still reassuring. The bar filled up as the night went on. A birthday group took over a long table behind us. 2 women sat a couple tables away, laughing loudly and leaning toward each other. One of them kept glancing in our direction, but I assumed it was because of the TV behind us. The noise level rose. Glasses clinked. People shouted at screens. At some point, he took his phone out to show me a video. Something dumb, a clip he thought was funny. He leaned closer so we could both see. Right then, the main TV above the bar flickered. The screen went black for half a second, then lit up again. His phone connected. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. It took my brain a moment to catch up. The TV wasn't showing the game anymore. It was showing a phone screen. His phone screen. Messages. Notifications. Names I didn't recognize popping up one after another. Profile photos. Hearts. Phrases that were way too personal to be accidental. The bar went quiet in a weird ripple, like people sensed something was off before they knew what it was. I stared at the screen, my stomach dropping lower with every second. There were messages from 3 different women, all recent, all flirty in a way that made my skin crawl. Nothing graphic enough to be censored, but intimate enough that there was no excuse. Plans. Compliments. Inside jokes. Timestamps from earlier that day. His face drained of color. He fumbled with his phone, swiping, tapping, panicking. The screen didn't change right away. It felt like forever but was probably seconds. I felt heat rush to my face. My ears rang. I could feel people looking at us now, fully aware something messy was happening. Then I noticed her. One of the women from 2 tables away had stopped laughing. She was staring straight at the screen, then at him, then at me. Her face tightened in recognition. Not confusion. Recognition. She leaned back slowly, crossing her arms, eyes never leaving our table. I realized then that one of the names on the screen belonged to someone in the room. The TV finally went dark again and the game came back on, like nothing had happened. The noise returned in bursts. Whispers. Laughter that felt too loud. He sat frozen, phone clutched in both hands. I felt like the floor had tilted. He started explaining immediately, talking fast, words tumbling over each other. I didn't process most of it. My focus was split between him and the woman still staring at me. She wasn't angry in a dramatic way. She looked tired. Like this was not new information for her. That somehow made it worse. I stood up without thinking. My legs moved before my brain gave permission. The stool scraped loudly against the floor. Heads turned. I grabbed my bag and stepped away from the table, creating space. He reached out but didn't touch me. His mouth kept moving. I didn't care. The woman 2 tables away stood too. Our eyes met for half a second. There was a silent understanding there that I can't fully explain. Not friendship. Not blame. Just shared embarrassment and something darker underneath it. She shook her head once, small and slow, then turned back to her table. I walked to the bar to close out my tab. My hands shook as I pulled my card out. The bartender didn't ask questions. She had that look like she had seen every version of this before. The total was $27. I signed without really seeing the numbers. As I turned to leave, I felt eyes on me again. People were pretending not to look, which somehow made it more obvious. I caught my reflection in one of the dark TV screens. My face looked tight and flushed and unreal, like I was watching someone else. Outside, the air felt heavy and damp. The neon sign buzzed overhead. I leaned against the brick wall and tried to slow my breathing. My phone buzzed immediately. Messages from him. Long ones. Apologies. Explanations. Excuses stacked on top of each other. I didn't open any of them. A minute later, another notification came through. A message from a number I didn't recognize. It was her. The woman from inside. She had found me through the app somehow, maybe through mutuals or a shared photo. She didn't accuse me of anything. She just said she thought she should tell me that she had been seeing him too. That she didn't know about me either. That the screen made everything make sense. I sat on the curb and stared at the message for a long time before responding. I told her I was sorry. I told her I had no idea. That was all I could offer. She reacted with a simple acknowledgement, and that was it. Two strangers briefly connected by the same mistake. The ride home felt longer than usual. Every red light gave me time to replay the screen lighting up. The names. The timestamps. The way the bar felt quiet. I kept thinking about how confident he had sounded when he said he was single. How easily the word came out. How normal everything had felt 5 minutes earlier. When I got back to my live space, I tossed my bag on the floor and sat on the couch in the dark. I didn't turn on any lights. My phone buzzed again. More messages from him. I blocked the number without reading them. Then I deleted the app entirely, not dramatically, just quietly, like closing a door. Later that night, I read through old screenshots on my phone from past dates, past conversations. Patterns started to look clearer. Things I had brushed off before suddenly felt louder. The bar TV incident didn't teach me anything new about people, but it did ruin the illusion that lies stay private. Sometimes they end up on a massive screen with sound on. A few weeks later, I went back to that bar with friends. Different table. Different night. The TVs played games and ads like they always had. No one remembered what happened except me. Every time a phone connected to a screen, my stomach flipped anyway.
I thought I was walking into a casual night with loud music and strangers I would forget by morning, not the kind of thing that permanently rewires how you read invitations. The hook, if I'm honest, was how relaxed she sounded about it. She said there was a party at a friend's place, nothing fancy, just people hanging out. I pictured plastic cups, bad playlists, maybe a balcony with too many people squeezed onto it. I had met her twice before, both low-key, both normal enough that my guard was down. That should have been my warning sign. The day of the party felt off in tiny ways. She took longer than usual to respond. When she did, her messages were short, almost clipped, like she was multitasking. She sent the address and said to come around 8. She didn't mention bringing anything, which I appreciated because I never know what's appropriate. I almost didn't go because I was tired and my social battery was low, but I convinced myself it would be fine. An hour, maybe 2, then I could leave. The house was bigger than I expected. Not mansion big, but definitely not casual party big. It sat at the end of a quiet street, all lights on, music already spilling out through open windows. Cars lined both sides of the road. I parked farther away and walked, listening to the bass thump through the pavement. I remember thinking it felt like a celebration, not just a hangout. Inside, everything was bright and crowded. String lights zigzagged across the ceiling. A table near the entrance was covered in gifts wrapped in pastel paper. I noticed them right away but didn't connect it to anything specific. People hugged each other, laughed loud, clinked glasses. The smell of food hit me hard. Catered food, not homemade. Trays of stuff that looked expensive. I felt underdressed instantly. She found me near the door and smiled wide, like she was relieved I showed up. She hugged me longer than usual. I noticed she was dressed nicer than I had ever seen her before. Not overdressed, just intentional. Her hair was done. Her makeup looked careful. I complimented her and she laughed it off, saying it was a special night. Again, I didn't ask what that meant. She introduced me to people fast, names blurring together. Friends, cousins, co-workers. Everyone seemed to know her well. They smiled at me in that curious way, like they were placing me into a puzzle they already understood. I felt like I had stepped into the middle of a story that had started long before I arrived. About 20 minutes in, I noticed the decorations more clearly. Balloons in matching colors. A banner draped across the back wall that didn't fully make sense at first because it was partially blocked by people. I shifted to get a better look and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't a housewarming. It was an engagement party. I stood there holding a drink I hadn't even sipped yet, staring at that banner like it might rearrange itself if I blinked enough. Engagement party. The words felt unreal, like they belonged to another house, another night. My brain scrambled for explanations that didn't involve me being exactly where I was. Maybe it was for someone else. Maybe I had misread it. Maybe it was a joke. She came back to my side, beaming, and asked if I was having fun. I asked what the party was for, even though I already knew. She said it was hers, casual as anything. Engaged. The word hit harder the second time. I asked who the groom was, still hoping for some strange misunderstanding. She said I would meet him soon. The way she said it made my skin crawl. Not playful. Not nervous. Just certain. Like this was a scheduled event and I was early. I felt heat rush to my face. People moved around us, laughing, oblivious. I suddenly felt very visible and very out of place. I asked how long she had been engaged. She shrugged and said a while. Long enough for this party to exist. Long enough for gifts to pile up. Long enough for me to not be here. I wanted to leave right then, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I felt stuck, like if I moved too fast I would draw attention. She led me toward the kitchen, talking about how she was glad I came, how it meant a lot. Her words washed over me without sticking. All I could think about was that sentence, that I would meet him soon, like a promise or a threat. People kept congratulating her, hugging her, raising glasses. Each time someone said her name followed by congratulations, it felt like a punch I wasn't braced for. No one looked at me strangely yet. I wondered if they knew who I was supposed to be. Friend. Coworker. Something else. Then he arrived. The energy in the room shifted in a way that's hard to describe unless you felt it. People turned. Smiles widened. Applause broke out. He walked in through the same door I had come through, carrying that confident posture of someone who knows exactly why they're there. Tall. Well-dressed. Comfortable. He went straight to her and lifted her off the ground in a hug. Cameras came out. Cheers got louder. I stood near the counter, frozen, watching it happen like a slow-motion clip. She saw me watching and smiled, then waved him over. She introduced us. I don't remember the exact words because my brain was screaming over everything. He shook my hand firmly, thanked me for coming, said it was nice to meet me. He looked me in the eye like there was nothing unusual about this moment. I realized then that she had never told him about me. Or maybe she had, but not honestly. Either way, I was now part of this mess in a way I hadn't agreed to. We stood there for a minute that felt like 10. He talked about how crazy the planning had been. How relieved he was the party was finally happening. She leaned into him, smiling, nodding, acting like this was the most natural scene in the world. I nodded along, my face stiff, my drink untouched. Someone asked how we knew each other. Before I could answer, she jumped in and said we were friends. The word landed wrong. Friend. It erased weeks of messages, late nights, shared jokes. It flattened everything into something harmless and convenient. I excused myself as politely as I could manage and stepped outside. The night air hit me hard. I leaned against the railing of the porch and tried to breathe normally. My hands were shaking. I felt stupid for not seeing this coming, even though there were no obvious signs. I felt used in a way that was hard to explain. Not for attention. Not for jealousy. For something darker. For control. For a secret thrill maybe. After a few minutes she came outside. She asked what was wrong, like she genuinely didn't understand. I told her I couldn't be there. I told her this was not okay. She looked annoyed more than sorry. She said she didn't think it would be a big deal. She said she wanted to see me. She said she didn't know how to tell me. I asked why she had invited me at all. She said she liked having parts of her life overlap. That sentence still makes my stomach twist. Overlap. Like people were just shapes she could stack without consequences. I left without saying goodbye to anyone else. I walked down the driveway past the parked cars, the music fading behind me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, but I ignored it. I didn't trust myself to read anything she might send. On the walk back to my car, I replayed everything. The gifts, the decorations, the way no one questioned my presence, the way he shook my hand, the way she smiled. It all felt unreal, like I had wandered onto a stage during the wrong act. When I got home to my live space, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch and stared at the wall. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. I just sat there, letting the night drain out of me. The next day I blocked her. Not out of anger, just necessity. I didn't want explanations or apologies or excuses. Nothing she could say would make that night make sense in a way that didn't feel wrong. Sometimes I think about that party when I see engagement photos online. The smiles. The balloons. The curated happiness. I wonder how many people in those rooms know the full story. I wonder how many overlaps exist that no one talks about.
I knew something was off before I even caught the lie. like the night had a tightness to it that never loosened. It wasn't nerves exactly. It was that feeling you get when the air in a room feels used up, like too many breaths have already been taken there. I almost canceled that date because my stomach felt weird all afternoon, but I told myself I was just being dramatic again. I didn't want to be the kind of person who backed out every time a vibe felt slightly wrong. We met at a rooftop lounge that sat on top of an old parking garage. Concrete floors, metal railings, fake plants everywhere. The city spread out below like a grid of glowing dots. He suggested it because he said he liked places where you could see everything. That should have been my first clue. I got there early and stood near the bar, watching people come and go, reminding myself that this was supposed to be fun. He showed up right on time, which impressed me. He looked put together, almost too put together for a casual night out. Crisp jacket, clean shoes, hair styled like he checked it twice before leaving. He smiled in a way that felt rehearsed but still charming. He hugged me briefly and guided us toward a small table near the edge, close to the railing. The height made my stomach flip, but the view was nice. The intro part of the date felt smooth on the surface. He talked easily, confidently. He asked questions but also answered his own a lot, like he was trying to stay ahead of the conversation. He told stories about work, about traveling, about people he knew in random cities. I nodded along, sipping my drink slowly. Something about his stories felt slippery, like details shifted depending on how he told them. The lie came out small. Almost to nothing. He mentioned living nearby, then later mentioned commuting from somewhere that was clearly not nearby. When I asked casually which one it was, his answer didn't line up with either version. He corrected himself too fast, then laughed it off like it was nothing. I smiled, but inside my chest tightened. I started paying closer attention after that. The way he avoided specifics. The way he redirected questions. The way his phone buzzed and he flipped it face down without checking. It wasn't one big red flag. It was a bunch of little ones stacking up until I couldn't ignore them. I decided I was done. Not angry. Not scared yet. Just done. I finished my drink and stood up, telling him I was going to head out. I expected him to be annoyed or disappointed. I didn't expect panic. His expression changed instantly. The charm dropped. His eyes widened and his smile froze halfway. He stood up fast enough that his chair scraped loudly against the concrete. People at nearby tables glanced over. He stepped closer to me, closer than was comfortable, and started talking fast. I didn't process the words. I was focused on the space shrinking between us. I tried to step around him toward the stairs. He moved with me, blocking the path. Not grabbing me. Not touching me. Just positioning himself in a way that made it clear he wasn't letting me pass. My heart started pounding hard enough that I felt it in my throat. I told him again that I needed to leave. I angled my body toward the exit. He mirrored me. The railing pressed cold against my back. The city lights blurred for a second as my vision narrowed. This was no longer awkward. This was wrong. He kept insisting we talk it out. That I was misunderstanding things. That I shouldn't leave like this. His voice was calm but his body wasn't. His hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. His foot tapped rapidly against the floor. Every instinct in me screamed to get out. I tried to duck under his arm. He shifted again, blocking me fully now. I realized then that he had planned this space. The narrow path. The railing. The table behind me. I was boxed in without being touched, which somehow made it worse. Like he knew exactly how far he could go without crossing a visible line. People were watching more openly now. Whispers started. Someone laughed nervously, like they thought it was a joke. I caught the eye of a server across the way and shook my head slightly. She hesitated, then nodded and walked toward the bar. My chest felt tight. My hands tingled. I kept my voice steady even though everything in me wanted to shake. I told him to move. He didn't. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, saying things about not embarrassing him, about not making a scene. The irony almost made me laugh. Security arrived faster than I expected. 2 people in black jackets approached from behind him. They asked what was going on. I stepped back immediately, using the space they created. He turned toward them, trying to explain, still smiling that same tight smile. I could see the switch flip in his head, the realization that he had lost control of the situation. They positioned themselves between us without touching either of us. One of them asked me if I was okay. I nodded but couldn't find my voice for a second. My throat felt closed. They asked if I wanted to leave. I nodded again, harder this time. As they guided me toward the stairs, I heard one of them say something that made my stomach drop even further. Apparently this wasn't the first time. They had dealt with him before. Other dates. Similar situations. Blocking exits. Refusing to let people leave. My skin crawled at the thought of how many times this had happened without anyone stepping in fast enough. He protested loudly now, his calm cracking. People stared openly. Phones came out. The scene he had warned me not to make was happening anyway. I didn't look back. I focused on the stairs under my feet, counting steps, breathing through the panic buzzing in my limbs. Once I was clear of the rooftop, one of the security staff walked me down to the street. The cool air hit my face and I finally felt like I could breathe again. My legs felt weak, like I had run too far without stopping. They asked if I needed help getting home. I said no, I just needed a minute. I stood on the sidewalk watching the building above me, lights glowing, music still playing like nothing had happened. People laughed on the street. Cars passed. The normal world kept moving while my body caught up to what had almost happened. My phone buzzed with messages from him almost immediately. Long ones. Apologetic ones. Angry ones. I didn't open them. I blocked his number and deleted the app right there on the sidewalk, my hands still shaking. On the walk home, every shadow felt sharper. Every person passing too close made my shoulders tense. I replayed the moment when he stepped into my path over and over, wondering how it could have gone if security hadn't noticed, if the server hadn't acted, if I had hesitated one more second. When I got back to my live space, I locked the door and leaned against it for a long time. I didn't cry. I didn't sit down. I just stood there listening to my own heartbeat slow down. Later that night, I got an email from the venue. A short one. They apologized for the incident and told me they had banned him. It was supposed to be reassuring. It wasn't. All I could think about was the word before. How many times he had tried this. How many people had frozen like I did. I slept with the lights on that night. Not because I was scared of the dark, but because I needed to see my surroundings clearly. The next day, everything felt slightly unreal, like the world had shifted a few degrees off center. I still go out. I still meet people. But I pay more attention now to exits, to space, to how someone reacts when you say no. Some moments don't feel dangerous until they are already closing in around you.